because he goes a little bit more in depth than the other one. But listening to that, I realized that he makes a good point in some ways. I definitely think that as black men, we do have a role in shaping the behaviors of everybody in our community, the young people in our community and the women in our community, where I sort of disagree with him. And I want to hear what you guys have to say about this, right? I don't think that African American men, and we're going all the way back to the first segment again, because of slavery, because of Jim Crow, because of all those things that, you know, I believe should be used to enforce a sort of ADOS specific affirmative action. I don't think black men are able specifically to be the type of leaders that we could be or should be in the community because we don't have wealth. We don't own anything. We don't control anything. And I think that a lot of us in our community, we sort of conflate class issues. We conflate class issues and race issues together a lot of times. And that's really one of the main byproducts of the type of systemic oppression and class warfare that has been declared against the black community through institutional racism on some level. We don't have wealth. We have hundreds of years of wealth missing from us thanks to slavery, thanks to Jim Crow, now the prison industrial complex of mass incarceration, redlining, and all these other things mean that we don't have the wealth to do a lot of these things. So are we really the leaders of a community where we don't own and control anything? I mean, in this city, let's just look at this city. Do we really own most of the property in this city? Or is it owned by others? Are most of the business that are here owned by black people, actually? I mean, I'm sure there's some, but I seriously doubt it. Okay, now I found the right clip. I'm sorry, I found the right clip here. Let me see whether I can get it to play now. Hopefully it will play finally.
Willingly leave the household, or was it the system that was?
It was systemic.
All right. So how, if we giving them grace for them having to do it without us, but it wasn't our fault, how are we not getting that same grace and that same respect?
I'm gonna tell you why.
Why?
I'm gonna tell you why. Because black men, as the leaders of the community, now
we can't be leaders.
Here's the question we got to make. Here's the question. Because the argument y'all make, feeds into the feminist agenda.
Okay.
It's an argument that says, I don't want the responsibility.
I'm a leader.
I don't want to fix right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to fall back and let her run everything. That's what the feminists tell. They say, look at them, making excuses for why they can't be better men, making excuses for why they can't make better men. You understand? Your argument feeds the feminist narrative. That's dangerous.
That's not what we're making excuses for.
I'm saying I am the better man, but I shouldn't be held responsible because you wanted to choose a Pookie and a Ray Ray. That's not me. I worked too hard in my life.
I'm going to go back to what I said. Pookie and Ray Ray shouldn't exist. And the only reason why Pookie and Ray Ray exist because we're not in the community making those boys the men they need to be. Do you see that? And, she don't get a Pookie if you didn't allow a Pookie.
But she got an Eli. She ain't come to Eli. She went to Pookie. And that's what we're trying to say.
She wouldn't have had a Pookie if we didn't allow one.
I worked too hard in my life.
She wouldn't have had a Pookie if we didn't allow one.
But Dr. Umar,
men supposed to make the raise the boys.
Right. We as men is holding other men accountable for the same thing that you're talking about right now.
What are we doing for the young brothers in the street? So
what you mean, mentoring them? Now I mean, he's a great father.
I ain't talking about that's individual. That's good, but that's individualism. What are we doing collectively as men to change the trajectory for black boys in the streets right now? Nothing.
We're being a voice. Yeah, I mean, you could take it.
It's not going to get better unless we put hands on deck. The reason the athletes and the rappers are the role models is the professional black man moved out the hood. Where the dentist at? He ain't in the black community no more. Where the lawyer at? Where the business owner at? Where your city council person at? We abandon black boys, and then we blame black men for poor choices in mates that they should not even have to make if we did a better job raising our boys the right way. At the end of the day, if I'm going to call myself a man, the ultimate responsibility for reconstruction of the black community rests with me. Yes, they have a role. Yes, they have responsibility. But as a man, as a leader, to say I can't fix this unless she changes, that's not the definition of a man.
I don't see. I think we're on two different accords. Like, I don't think we're saying that. What I'm saying is I'm capable of being that leader, that provider. I've worked hard in my life. You get what I'm saying? I should not have to do.
You still go back to individualism.
But I only feel like we tell black men that we have to now deal with masculine women, women with children.
Why is she masculine? Because she's had to raise the kids alone. Not one woman, so brother, a whole community.
So you mean to tell me the only woman I could look forward in my life is a masculine woman that has kids by other men?
No.
That's what I have to look forward to?
But I'm telling you, mistakes made by black men systemically gave rise to the conditions that allowed her to be masculine and made her end up with a man that you consider to be less than what he should be. And I'm telling you, black men are responsible for her being masculine because we have not helped her raise them children. And when I say help them raise them children, I don't mean you as the stepdad. I mean you as an active member in the community where we go to every single parent black mother and say, how many sons you got? 2? How many sons you got? 2? Well, guess what? That's your son's big brother. That's your son's big brother. He taking them to school. He doing the homework. He gonna spend a couple hours with him every Saturday. He got his own kids too, but he gonna make time for you. She got masculine because she had to become masculine in order to deal with the rape, the abuse, the domestic violence, the disappointments that men had in her life, and also raising those kids and have to take care of herself all at the same time. The black woman has been the be-all, end-all in our community for half of a century, and now we want to turn around and say because she didn't do it perfectly enough or remain feminine enough when she had to absorb our responsibilities plus her own, that's insensitive and disingenuous.
Whew. Man, Dr. Umar is a, you can say a lot of things about Dr. Umar. That is a man who never lacks for an opinion. He never lacks for an opinion. That's a very strong opinion. And I understand what he's saying 100%. I get what he's saying. But the one thing I always say when it comes to people who are very racially conscious is that when race, like, it goes back to that old saying. I always like to drag it out from Wesley Clark. He says, when the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. When the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem looks like a nail. So a lot of the issues that he's talking about are universal in all bad communities, or I won't say all poor communities. We can go to a trailer park. I guarantee you there's a dearth of men there too. We can go to a barrio. We can go to Mexico. We can go to Guatemala. We can go to Honduras. We can go to Brazil. We can go to South Africa. We can go to the worst parts of Russia. We go to anywhere you have a dearth of wealth and opportunity, you're going to have a lot of single mothers who have to absorb the roles of both parents, because a lot of the men are going to end up falling into drugs or into the streets. That's not just here in America. That's not just African Americans. Now, where race becomes an issue is that race is the reason that we have been poor for 400 years. And I think a lot of us in the black community, we do this, we try to make all of our issues pathological solely to us. This is only our problem. We're the only people in the world with this problem. And we're not. We are not. These are issues that exist worldwide. Single parenthood and the sort of Ray Pookie culture where there ain't no good men around. Look, when white people in this country were redlined into ghettos, they were Al Capone. The original Pookie. They were Meyer Lansky. They were Lucky Luciano. They were Albert Anastasia. They were Murder, Inc. Al Capone's Chicago was 95% white by our standard. And as you guys know, to this day, Al Capone's Chicago is the standard for gangsterdom in American history. So what happened? Did white people just decide to quit committing crime one day and just decide to be functional, law-abiding, tax-paid citizens? Did they just simultaneously get it together? No. That's not what happened. Post-World War II, America changed its racial classification systems. And all those immigrant groups, like the Irish, like the Italians, like the Jews, who were committing all that crime from the 1700s into the 1940s and 50s, they all at one stroke became white. Now, what did whiteness provide for them? Whiteness provided them the ability to move to the suburbs. When ghettos were being built specifically to put blacks in them. I think we talked about this before. I talked about Robert Moses, the city planner for New York City. I actually got to do a Men Who Ruined America segment on Robert Moses. Like, if I haven't already, I will. Because that dude was a trip. But anyway, Robert Moses was the city planner of New York City for most of the 20th century. He was the most powerful man in New York City for most of the 20th century. Why is Robert Moses important? He is the father of the modern city. The fact that we see cities the way that we see cities now, with black people in the inner city and white people in the suburbs, that's him. He invented that. That was his idea. And so in New York City, they started building all these suburbs like Levittown, where Bill O'Reilly grew up, and all these other suburbs, with the sole purpose of that's where the jobs and the opportunities would be, in these suburbs. And the poverty would be funneled. Blacks and some Hispanics in a lot of instances would be funneled into the ghettos of New York City. And that's where all the crime and poverty would go. Into the inner cities, the ghettos, where blacks would be trapped. And they built they built highways through all the black communities, which funneled the wealth out of the black communities to make it even worse. And the black communities were redlined, which meant that the properties in black communities could not accumulate wealth. So the result of that was a black community that perpetually had poor schools, poor social services, poor people. At the same time that the United States government exacerbated the situation by sending all the jobs overseas. We started seeing it in places like here in what is called the Rust Belt. We're in the Rust Belt right now. I'm a proud Rust Belter here in Gary, Indiana. I'm a few blocks away from U.S. Steel as I'm speaking to you guys. They started closing up the mills, deindustrializing cities like Gary, Detroit, Flint, Michigan, heavily black cities, Cleveland. Buffalo, New York, all these cities were being deindustrialized, and even in the larger cities, the manufacturing base was leaving. Those were some of the few jobs that allowed black men to be able to be black men. My father worked at a mill for 45 years, bought a house, married my mom. My parents have been together since Jimmy Carter was president. That's how that happened. I got an uncle, worked in a steel mill for 50 years, bought a house, married my auntie, raised 5 children. That's how that happened. Labor did that. Organized labor did that. Union jobs did that. Good paying jobs did that for working class men. That's how you end up not having pookies. And in the 1960s and 70s, they started funneling the jobs away from our community. And so now you have a few more pookies and a few more pookies. And black women have to shoulder the blame for that because all the pookies are either dying or going to jail. But the cycle starts with the end of well-paying jobs, secure jobs, and opportunities. And so I understand what Brother Umar, Dr. Umar is saying. But the one thing the issue I always have with a lot of racialists, they don't understand that the things that go on in our communities are policy decisions. They are all policy decisions. The homelessness that you see, we could end homelessness in America with $20 billion. Tomorrow. Homelessness is a choice. We could end gangbanging tomorrow, just like we ended gangbanging when white people were doing it under Al Capone and Meyer Lansky and Lucky Luciano and Murder, Inc. We could end gangbanging tomorrow as we know it. They ended it by ending prohibition. Those people didn't just decide to stop committing crime one day. America legalized alcohol, allowed the Italians and the Irish and the Jews to go legit. And they did. And they allowed them to move to the suburbs. And therefore now, they are not considered the criminal class any longer. America could end the war on drugs tomorrow. We just covered Richard Nixon, why he started the war on drugs, to destroy black communities. We've had 50 years of policies that have been particularly specifically aimed at the black community, destroying generations of black households, black families. It's not just a matter of, well, if we all just do this. These are policy decisions. That's why I'm so hard on Donald Trump. That's why I'm so hard on Joe Biden. That's why I'm so hard on Barack Obama, on Hillary Clinton, on George W. Bush, on Ronald Reagan. That's why I did the segment on Richard Nixon last week, I'm sorry. Well, I'm tired. I flubbed so much tonight. I'm sorry. I didn't get a lot of sleep. I'm sorry. But these are policy decisions made by all these people. The poverty you see, the single mothers you see, the drugs you see, the gangs you see, they are policy decisions made by the people in charge. We like to think that we could all just decide one day out of the blue to change everything out of the blue. That doesn't happen. It just doesn't happen. Policy changes happen. And until the policy changes, not much is going to change, folks. Let me get this caller. Hello, caller. Hello, caller. Could you repeat yourself? I accidentally did turn on the mic.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Okay. Good evening. I wanted to add something to the mix and then try to maybe leave a little hope in there.
Yeah, sure.
I remember the Vietnam War, the Korean War and the Vietnam War did a lot of damage as well. When certain people could, if you were smart enough or if you had money enough to go to school, go to college and defer going to the service, that would be a lot of help. And so many people exercised that. But in our cases, many could not. And, between the ravages of war and what they saw, what they felt and what they experienced, and then the drugs that they were allowed to have, and then it come back over here, and some did it to kill the pain, and some did it to kill other kinds of pain. And some could not find a job, so they dealt what they could deal. That really did huge damage to us. And I took a class at IU some years ago. In fact, during or after the war. And I remember a white professor was kind enough to show us this is what, some of the facts. And he showed that some statistics that proved that there were more female African American children born during certain eras than there were males. So we looked at, there weren't only so many men in the first place. And it wasn't that it was just men deserting families. It was women doing what they thought they had to do because men were in short supply, and then of the ones left, many were damaged, hurt by the war.
Right.
But to address what that clip was talking about, my heart is full. I buried a cousin this past weekend out of state. But what captured my heart, is that I always knew he was a great guy, but found out some other things at his memorial service. He was a master barber, had been barbering since he got his license and graduated from high school. And it was right in a service town, so you can make some money right outside of a town where all these Army people and service people have to get their haircut. But he was known as a mentor, and I saw at least 20 people from the ages of 12 up to gray-haired men saying that this man, he gave me my first haircut. He gave me my first job.
Wow.
He gave me my first suit.
Right.
He always tried to make sure that we were guys, make sure we had money in our pockets. And I mowed his lawn. That was my first job. Cleaning up at the barbershop, my first job. They were told it was okay to let the school bus drop me off after school at his house, at his salon, at the barbershop. I've never seen people say that their parents let them off at somebody else's place, and you never hear anything about molestation. You never hear anything about negatives. And he was a family man in his own right with his own family. Did that first. But there is hope if many of us look beyond our own four walls and see what we can do to make a difference. Everybody can't do the same thing. My dad, I remember one time we were, it was 4th of July weekend, I think, and he had to work because he worked 2 jobs. He worked in the mill, and he worked another side job. And he had to work and wouldn't be able to celebrate with me or with our family. So he drew me a flag and colored it. And I thought it was the most delightful thing. I was stupid, and I didn't know any better. And so I corrected his spelling because he didn't spell daddy right. But he did daddy, as nobody else could ever do. No one could ever do a better job. Well, and I look back and I marvel at how in our community we had the man who picked up the garbage, and he couldn't read or write. Everybody loved and respected our men, and that's what we really need to get back to. Thanks. Bye-bye.
All right, it's all good. Thank you for your call. That was beautiful. I appreciate all you guys. I really do. It's one of the reasons why I love staying here in the city of Gary, Indiana, because so many of you are thoughtful. You don't let the constant barrage of negativity about Northwest Indiana and specifically Gary and East Chicago, etc., make you bitter and lose hope. And that inspires me to never lose hope about this community. I believe in this place. I believe in Northwest Indiana in general. I was born in Hammond, raised in East Chicago and Gary. I'm a Tri-City guy through and through. I really do believe in this place. I believe in this city and Gary. And it warms my heart to know that so many of you other people do too, and think that there is hope for the next generation out there, and we'll never stop looking for answers. That's what the show is about. It's just issues and answers. My Country with Scott Canning. Chop it up with me on Twitter, folks, at The Chemist Live.